this magnetic field, this geomagnetic field, which is what's another name for what's going on in the psychosphere. I'm trying to be able to say what's in there, what's it made out of. It's everybody goes, it's all one and we're all part of the same thing. That's fuzzy thinking for me. I'm not saying that experience isn't there, that those of us who've had mystical experiences have that feeling of oneness, that feeling of unconditional love. But there's something in between that's also gives us a sense of oneness, which is the psychosphere. And the psychosphere is a thing that can be studied, and it may well be a hologram of the bigger thing, or it may be just a fractal of something bigger. A hologram and fractals are different. A hologram is say a two-dimensional representation of three dimensions, or a third-dimensional representation of a fourth dimension. That's holograms. But fractals are the same thing repeated at different levels of size, different scales. So I think the psychosphere might be a fractal of the universe itself.
Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Quidu, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. We do this through online presentations and interviews with guest speakers, as well as we have classes and study groups around different topics relating to consciousness. And we draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science, consciousness, spirituality, and philosophy. We are in our 20th year, which is exciting. We started in 2003. However, it was 2020 when we began recording our presentations on Zoom. And our video recordings, which we started recording in 2020, but our YouTube channel we set up in, I think it was about a year later, 2021, during the pandemic. And our video recordings are viewable through our website, which is caritascenter.org, and our YouTube channel, Caritas Consciousness Project. And we have over 100 recordings at this point. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. So if you enjoy these presentations and classes and study groups and you'd like to support our program, you can make a donation on our website, or you can become a member and enjoy the benefits of membership. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Dr. Bernard Beitman is founding director of the Coincidence Project, which encourages people to tell each other their synchronicity and serendipity stories. His book, Meaningful Coincidences, How and Why Serendipity and Synchronicity Happen, published in 2022, comprehensively describes their wide range of uses and explanations. And I loved the book. This is what it looks like. It's really very compelling. Highly recommend it. The book serves both as a personal guide to using synchronicities and serendipities, as well as an introduction to the new discipline of coincidence studies. He's the former chair of psychiatry at the University of Missouri, Columbia, and has a private practice in Charlottesville, Virginia. His manual, Learning Psychotherapy, received 2 national awards for its unique interactive training program for psychiatric residents. He's internationally known for research in panic disorder and chest pain. That was an interesting story about how that came about. and has edited several books about how to integrate pharmacotherapy and psychotherapy. He went to Swarthmore College and Yale Medical School and did his psychiatric residency at Stanford. He was captain of the baseball team in high school and college. He was scouted by the Oakland Raiders pro football team, tried out for the Pittsburgh Pirates pro baseball team, and played rugby at Yale and in San Francisco. The stories in his first book, Connecting with Coincidence, published in 2016, illustrate how meaningful coincidence can be useful in most aspects of life. And his website is, not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Bernie, is it Coincider or Coincider?
Coincider. It's a way of playing with the word. You're co-insider. Right. And a coincider is somebody who experiences a lot of coincidences.
I see. Coincider. That's COINCIDER.com is his website. So welcome, Bernie, and thank you so much for joining us. And I have a lot of questions for you. Could we start with your maybe just telling us, how did your interest in meaningful coincidences come about? Probably through a meaningful coincidence, if I remember correctly.
Why not? I mean, that's the way this thing works. First, I want to say hello to each one of you that are here live or in person, and I see you. And I'm a kind of a dialogue kind of guy. I'm a therapist. I like talking with people, but I'm sure glad to see the Chris person, whoever which one you are, raise your book. That's the Chris, but you had the book. So you might even have read it. And just so you know, I love this stuff. I love meaningful coincidences. And I also love hearing my introduction as like I played football and rugby and baseball and tried out for the Pirates and was scouted by the Oakland Raiders. I mean, I love that part of my history because I don't look like I'm a football player, and I didn't then either. But it had laid the foundation for what I'm doing. It's just I'm still carrying the ball. This time, the ball is meaningful coincidences. And I'll get to how I started this, but the reason I use the word meaningful coincidences is partly because synchronicity is a bit of a woo-woo term, and I want to get this idea out into the general public much more than it is. So a lot of people know what coincidence means and meaningful means, kind of. And synchronicity is not the only meaningful coincidence. Serendipity, as Gloria mentioned at the beginning, is also one. And also seriality, which is seeing a string of monkeys or whatever the object is, but they're all observable in the real world. That there's not a connection between a mind and an object, which a lot of coincidences are, but they're all out there. And simultaneity, which is one of the stories I'm going to tell, which is feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. Let me just ask you, just for a show of whatever you want to show me, have you experienced the pain of a loved one at a distance? Any of you? Jane has. Anybody else? And Gloria has. So this happened. That happened to me. That's one of the ways I got into this. And I'll tell you my story, but I think it's worthwhile for each of us to hear other people's experience of the same thing, if that's all right with you, Gloria, because I would like to hear yours and I'd like to hear Jane's, because it's a subject that I'm currently studying in more detail than I had before, but I'll explain why. So Jane, let's start with you, then I'll go, and then we'll do Gloria.
Okay, I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah, no, I had a friend who I just like out of the blue started thinking about her and like was very concerned about her. I knew that she was going hiking that day. And so like I was thinking about her and like felt this need to like call her right away, but I couldn't get a hold of her, and was just like sending her good energy and thinking about her until I like finally heard from her, and she had actually gotten lost on a trail, and like then like eventually found her way back to where she was going, but uh I don't know, it wasn't like so much a pain, but just this like state of anxiousness, and like she didn't know what to do. And then she eventually found her way like back to where she was going. So it was like more kind of just like a heightened state of like
Let's say distress.
distress. Yeah.
Pain is, I should say, pain or distress, um, rather than just stay with pain. So that's the same idea. Around the time you were feeling distress, she was feeling distress. She was lost. So
Yeah.
you picked up on that. And the point, that's the point of what I'm talking about here, is simultaneity. That's a term I've given to it, and it's common. And data, I have data, and other people have data that this sort of feeling the pain or distress of a loved one who's not in the same room is like not often, but happens with a lot of people. Gloria, what was yours?
Oh, mine is rather trivial, but I was just talking to my brother and started feeling feverish and, just achy. And he told me he had the flu, or I guess he called it a cold, but he was sick.
And where was he?
He was about 100 miles away.
And then and he called you or you called him?
Um, Good question. I think he called me.
Okay, well that's how it happened. At least stories are the meat of all this coincidence thing. And what happened? It happened to me was I was in San Francisco. It was 1973. I was about 31 years old, and I was standing at a sink at 11 p.m. San Francisco time, and I was choking uncontrollably. There was something caught in my throat. I couldn't get it out of my throat. I've never choked like that before, and I haven't since. And finally, I don't know how long. It seemed like quite a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe 5, but it was a lot of choking. And that was 11 p.m., February 26, 1973. Uh, the next morning, my brother called me from Wilmington, Delaware. Our father, who had been in pretty good shape, he had some major medical problems, but he was going to get out of the hospital, had bled into his throat at 2 a.m. Wilmington, Delaware time, 3,000 miles away. He was choking and dying on his own blood, and I was choking uncontrollably. So I says to myself, "Hey, man, maybe there's something to this, you know." It's pretty close in time for that to happen, and it was very similar what he was doing, what I was doing. And the two stories here are also show us the physical similarities that get involved with some of these things. So that got my attention. Uh, I, People know that when your father dies and you're a son, you got your own future to look for right there. You're going to die too, so it kind of gets you. And women with their mothers, I mean, it goes around the other way too. But my own mortality became evident. And part of the reason that I told you the dates, February 26, 1973, is because in Wilmington, Delaware, it was the next day. It was February 27th, and that's my birthday.
Hmm.
So my father died on my birthday.
Hmm.
Not only did they get the choking thing connected, but died on my birthday. And I don't know if I don't think it takes too much to think that maybe he was saying, Bernie, remember me.
Hmm.
Bernie, remember me. And I'm remembering you right now, Pop. I mean, each time I tell that story, maybe you're around listening to it because it's about you, and I around and enjoying it with me, because it gave me the seed for some very interesting concepts. Now, what is this? Have you ever heard another word for this feeling the pain or distress of a loved one at a distance? There is a word that you know, but hasn't been used in this way for about 150 years.
Clairvoyance?
No, but it's something like clairvoyance.
Clairsentience.
What?
Clairsentience.
I'm so clairsentient. Yeah, that's that you got to throw that in there. But it wasn't just clairsentience. It wasn't just clairvoyance. I was feeling what he was feeling.
Yeah, it's like an empathic
It's an empathic thing, and it's empathy at a distance.
yeah,
That's what both the other stories were. It's empathy at a distance.
right, right.
Telepathy.
That's right. Who said telepathy? You did. You read my book.
Well, I wrote down every definition of every word in there, trying to figure it all out and sort it out.
You sorted it out right. I mean, in the old days, that's what telepathy meant. Tele at a distance and pathy, feeling. That's what telepathy meant. But
I was very surprised, Bernie, and I was very surprised by what you mentioned in your book, what Freud wrote about telepathy. When he said, I wrote it down, he said, one is led to the suspicion that this is the original archaic method of communication between individuals, and that in the course of phylogenetic evolution, it has been replaced by the better method of giving information with the help of signals, which are picked up by the sense organs. But the older method might have persisted in the background. And I was blown away by that, because he was so critical of Jung's interest in the paranormal. And then he goes and says this, yeah, I thought that was really cool. And it made me think that in dreams, that's how we communicate. If you notice, if you pay attention when you're dreaming and someone is talking to you, usually their lips aren't moving. Yeah. So I think that's how we communicate in the spirit world also. Yeah. So,
well,
okay.
that's what, Gloria, that's why I put that in there, because the reason Freud got onto Jung was to not let the black mud of occultism come into our practice.
Right.
Which one of his Freud's quotes. And the reason he didn't want to is because he knew his psychoanalytic thing was problematic enough, that dreams were like royal roads to the unconscious, and he didn't want to get too far out.
Right.
But
yeah.
he and now currently psychoanalysts now have some recognition of telepathy in between the patient and therapist, and there's a mechanistic difference between telepathy in the same room and telepathy at a distance, and it's a subject that I'm studying now. I have a podcast called Connecting with Coincidence, in case any of you want to follow up on this stuff, and it's a recent one I did, just me yapping at the screen, about how telepathy works, a model for telepathy. And one of the reasons people don't believe in telepathy, science says it can't happen, of course, but is that we don't have an explanation for it. So I wanted to come up with an explanation that is pretty simple and visual and comprehensible. And there's a diagram in that YouTube interview of myself about how that might work. And so I'd like to describe that to you about how it might work, telepathy. And it's pretty simple. A rectangle or a square is all I'm going to draw. The fundamental but not absolutely necessary ingredient of telepathy is an emotional, positive relationship between the two people. It's not always the case, but it's mostly the case. Jane and Gloria talked about people that they're each involved with. Part of the issue is that if you're not involved with them, nobody's going to tell the other one that we had this experience. So you have to be able to tell each other. So it's a kind of a little bit of a red herring. You got to be able to talk with each other in order for it to be determined that some telepathy took place. So there may be a lot of telepathy going on, but we don't tell each other, and that's just it's just possible. But the ones we know about are the ones you tell each other, as the two of you have, and my brother told me. So let's say you need to have a strong relationship, usually, and you have to have something I called the psychosphere. You are now entering the twilight zone.
Mhm.
And for those of you who have read my book, you know towards the end.
Yeah.
Gloria, what did you get out of that part about the psychosphere?
Oh, well, I love Ian Stevenson. He coined the term, right? And in fact, we've had Jim Tucker, who took over he worked with Stevenson and then succeeded him in the project of children, the research on children who remember previous lives. So I love the part on the psychosphere, and I was going to ask you to talk about it. Did you want me to explain it? I think you could probably explain it better than I can.
I should hope so, but I really would like to hear how you thought about it.
Bernie, the part that really got me excited, because I didn't know about this before, is in terms of the psychosphere, is the part that had to do with as above, so below. I think it was, let me see, I put the page number, page 121, about the hertz. And it said the spectrum of brain waves as the below, right, in the saying as above, so below. Brain waves are electromagnetic currents generated by our brains, and they range across a spectrum from about 4 hertz to 60 hertz. And then as the above, the ionosphere begins about 40 miles above the Earth's surface, and it's between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere that there is this electromagnetic cavity, and lightning that frequently occurs in this cavity generates electromagnetic currents that range across the spectrum from 4 hertz to 60 hertz, just like our brain waves. And these waves are called the Schumann resonance. I had heard of the Schumann resonance, but I had no idea that it was triggered by lightning. And then you say that the human EEG and the Schumann resonances occupy a similar portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. The similarity between these two spectras suggests that there's a link between them, and we just don't know what it is yet. But yeah, and then meditation, relaxed states, and creative states are characterized by EEG frequencies around 4 to 8 hertz. I thought that was amazing. That was very exciting to me. Just that there's that correspondence, and you said, let me see if I can find. I don't know where that is. Just that it. Yeah. All right. So I just thought that was really interesting. Sorry.
I related it to trees. My husband and I have a nature preserve, and you see the individual trees, and then below the surface, all the roots are interconnected, and now they're finding that mushrooms are a whole, what is it, the cottonwoods? No. Aspen trees are all one unit. And I could relate to that. It's like we're all individual people and we have this interconnectedness. That for Robert and I, one of the problems we're having, because this is very new to us, this whole field. But there are many, many incidents with hindsight we realized had to do with this, but we did not just assume everybody is picking up on these things. I had no idea that some people are more sensitive than others, or that everybody doesn't experience these things. And then some of them, like Robert and I had a shared dream, and I don't know where the heck that fits in, but it was pretty alarming. It was about animal experimentation and torture. It was down to the rooms and the description.
Well, it was a dream about CIA torture labs that we had
Oh,
heard
wow.
about. And they were torturing these animals
But we
in order
saw
to
them.
prepare for warfare.
Yeah.
And we both dreamed about that same place, the same night, same
Same
time, I
night.
guess.
In detail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's pretty rare, but it happens. Yeah. My two daughters had the same dream about me the same night years ago, and they weren't living together. They were living not too far from each other. But so I think these terms like psychosphere, noosphere, collective unconscious, akashic records, they all have kind of the same basis in this connection, that we are all connected, we are all one. Would you say, Bernie?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole idea. One of the big ideas about studying meaningful coincidences is that what you described about the trees and the roots interconnected is turn that upside down, and that's probably what's happening in the psychosphere, this mental atmosphere that I'm trying to describe. And coincidences show us some of the ways in which those roots and mycorrhizomes that are part of the conduction of information for trees and food and information underneath the grounds that connect them. I'm going to go off to a little side because you made the mistake, Chris, of talking about trees. And that mistake is like tuned in to right where I am. I love communicating with trees. I've got a couple of 3 trees in a forest 20 minutes from my house. A couple of maybe 12 years ago, I was just minding my own business, really, walking along one of the trails up near it's in Mint Springs, near Crozet, which is from 20 miles, as I mentioned, from here, 20 minutes. And something stopped me. So I turned around, and there were these 2 trees that I saw. And we started having a relationship, me and these 2 trees. One was thicker and darker. I called him the king, and one was slenderer and lighter. And I called that one the queen. And I'd go up there and have these telepathic communications with those trees. Until one day I saw that there was a 3rd one there. I'd been there the whole time, but I didn't see it. And so now I go up there, and we form, if you want the 3rd tree back there, the 2 trees next to each other, and then me, and we form a 4-sided geometric pattern, a rhombus. That's not a square, it's a rhombus because it has angles aren't 90 degrees. And I go up there and I do the rhombus with them. We do the rhombus to them. Sometimes they are a portal, they feel like it, to another dimension. And I've asked them about that. Are you a portal to another dimension? And they said, you wouldn't understand. And I said, well, try me. And I said, are you serious? I mean, so we talked about maybe being from Sirius, and some said they said we represent Beelzebub. Maybe you know that name. In Christianity, that's the devil, but Beelzebub's letters to his grandson. It's not quite so bad. So I mean, I have these relationship things with the trees. But the one thing I'll leave this part of the discussion is that they like me to sing to them. And how do I know they like me to sing to them? Because they smile when I sing to them. And how do you see trees smile? Well, if you don't look, you can see they're smiling. If you look straight at them, they're not. And then a couple of trees I noticed were like dancing with each other. I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm allowed to say what's crazy and what's not, even about myself. So this is a lot of observation that I'm not the only one seeing these things. So I go up and what kind of songs are the trees like? Well, you might guess they're songs that have stuff like mountain and sky in them. And so one of the songs they like is Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's one of their favorites. Uh, it's just, so I sing it somewhere, they pretend like there's birds flying above, way up high or blue sky. It's like we get into it, and they like it, and they make that clear to me. So you can tell I have a good time with them, and I've had a lot of other things happen with
I
them.
was
So
just singing that this morning.
you're just singing that this morning. Well, just you bring up the trees today, and that's a connection to what I'm thinking about. And Gloria, you brought up something I don't remember now. I should have written it down, but it was right along the lines that I'm thinking of these days. And what we're doing here, and what I like, is creating a small bubble of psychospheric activity. Psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, and our mental atmosphere is something that we give energy and information into, and we take energy and information from it. We're in a constant communication with it, whether we like it or not, just as we are with breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. It's a dynamic interchange. It's probably related to the idea of spirit, which with many languages also means breath. Breath and spirit give and take with this mental atmosphere. And when we do that, when we give and take, we come up with ideas sometimes. And what we're doing here is creating a subcategory or a sub bubble of the psychosphere as part of just jamming together, because musicians do that. It could be called a morphic field. There's a lot of different names for it, or magnetic field. I'm talking with a guy from Heart Math who knows electromagnetic stuff, and he's helping me with that Schumann resonance and what's going on in this psychosphere activity. He just sent me a paper, thank goodness, where he's saying the same thing I'm saying, that this magnetic field, this geomagnetic field, which is what's another name for what's going on in the psychosphere. I'm trying to be able to say what's in there, what's it made out of. It's everybody goes, it's all one and we're all part of the same thing. That's fuzzy thinking for me. I'm not saying that experience isn't there, that those of us who've had mystical experiences have that feeling of oneness, that feeling of unconditional love. But there's something in between that's also gives us a sense of oneness, which is the psychosphere. And the psychosphere is a thing that can be studied, and it may well be a hologram of the bigger thing, or it may be just a fractal of something bigger. A hologram and fractals are different. A hologram is say a two-dimensional representation of three dimensions, or a third-dimensional representation of a fourth dimension. That's holograms. But fractals are the same thing repeated at different levels of size, different scales. So I think the psychosphere might be a fractal of the universe itself. But I don't know that. But there's a lot of fractal stuff going on around here. And that's why, I mean, it's a hypothesis. But meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in there in the psychosphere. And the Earth creates a magnetic field, because there's a lot of molten iron in the middle, and it shakes around and it moves a lot of electrons. And when you move electrons around, you get a magnetic field created. And this magnetic field, according to this guy at HeartMath, has information as well as energy in it that can communicate to us. And that's what I was looking for. In this paper I got, he comes to that conclusion at the end. That
and memory.
The Akashic record is somewhere in this thing. It's Akashic records is like the cloud in computing. It's and the cloud and Akashic record. What we are doing in this life is creating technologies that reflect our own capacities.
Yeah.
Oh, you go along with that, Gloria?
Yeah, I remember when the World Wide Web came about, I remember thinking this is a foreshadowing of our ability, our building our capacity for telepathic communication. That's what occurred to me when I first heard about the World Wide Web. I thought someday we won't need it. We'll be able to do what the web does, you know.
Yeah, exactly what I think.
Yeah.
And in
Jenna?
terms of trees, it's called the Wood Wide Web.
Yep.
The World Wide Web. I like that.
Yeah, the Wood Wide Web. Jennifer, did you want to say something?
Well, talking in terms of the hertz, when I was getting the feeling that there's a possibility that we moderate, or we have the ability, or will someday reach the ability, just like what you were just talking about, to moderate our hertz, to be able to connect to what we were connecting to with willfully instead of spontaneously. Because I take it that your experience with the trees was spontaneous, which is wonderful. But if there's something that we want to go deeper into, will we or do we have the ability to push a button in our head and moderate to that frequency that we're hoping? Is there something we can do? Because I spend a lot of time walking with trees. My trees are pines, and I do talk to them. I've also had experiences in their presence where I felt that I had entered another dimension. I lost the ability to understand where I was at the moment that I was in this place surrounded by them. And I didn't, even walking out of that location, I still didn't know where I was. And it's a place that I walk almost every day. So I feel there was a crossover, but I guess my question is, do you think we can do it willfully, or is it only spontaneous until what happens is like what's happening with artificial intelligence, that we're going to get to a point where we can?
Oh yeah, Netflix had a show in one of its science fiction things where you just thought of somebody you wanted to call, and it was like using their cell phone without using your fingers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen, and it's this frequency or resonance that you are talking about are what we do. That it's getting so that I'm noticing that I got to figure out. I get a little nervous about it, but I've had 3 instances where I needed something recently, and people who I didn't know showed up with it. And
Well,
and I'm a founder of the Coincidence Project, and 2 of them were really important. One was some money, because we're a nonprofit too, and we're like Gloria saying, "Give us some money. We can't survive without the money." Well, it's true. Money makes the world go around. Oh, that's love, isn't it? But money makes these things happen. And there's $1,000 showed up in my mailbox unsolicited, and then I got contact with the woman, and we got another 25, and I got to call her again because she makes money from from what's his name, Musk, Elon Musk's car business, because somebody told her to buy some stocks in 2007, and she gives money away, and I gotta wait till her mood gets better, which is determined by how high the stock is or how low it is. So I'm going to have to call her again. She invited me to do that, but that was one thing. And we needed somebody to edit the stories on the Coincidence Project website, because people send in stories and we publish them, and they need editing sometimes. And I got an old hippie girlfriend to help with that. But any of you know astrology, she was a sextuple, a sextuple Aquarius.
Wow.
6 sun, moon, rising sign, Venus and Mars, not uncommonly, and Mars. And that's a lot of Aquarius, man. And she became known as Frantic Francis. And she was really good, but she was too detailed. So she quit. And the next day I get an email from some guy who says, I do a lot of stuff with websites, and I want to be able to help the Coincidence Project. I want to be able to give to it. And he was even better than Francis was. And I assume that's happened to some of you too, where what you needed shows up.
Mhm.
Yeah, Bernie, can you talk a little bit about some of the drivers of coincidence? Some of the, states of mind and situations which seem to drive more coincidences.
I prefer increase the likelihood
Okay.
rather than drive, but I think there is a drive involved. This may strike each of you as unbelievable, but I'm going to take my chances. If you don't notice a coincidence, it doesn't exist. So the first cause or explanation of a coincidence is that somebody's got to notice it. It's something like the tree fall in the forest thing. Does it make a noise? Well, I can see a coincidence that happens to somebody else, which still counts. It's still, I saw the coincidence. So you have to be able to notice it. And then what makes you able to notice it becomes the next question. Coincidences are eminently psychological. They require a mind to exist. You have to put the two things together. So after you become aware of coincidences, then you may be able to start looking for them. I think I've developed a coincidence awareness button in my head. So
Antenna.
You too?
No, I said antenna.
Antenna. Well, that works too. But something happens is that, oh, there's one. That you have to notice them and then be aware of. Now, some people don't notice any of them until they get hit really fast in the face with them. You got to be knocked in the face to be able to see them for some people. And then they start noticing them. But I know one guy, you may know Jeff Mishlove, who's pretty famous with his podcast, and he won $500,000 for an essay he did on evidence for past living, for survival of the soul, of the psyche. He had one big one in his life, and that's all he knows. He didn't have any more. I know he has other ones, but he doesn't notice them. I'm satisfied with one. He says that got him to question it, how they happened, how this one happened. And then he brought it to the psychology faculty at Berkeley, and where he was a graduate student. They couldn't explain it. He got mad. He tried to explain it, and he got the first and only PhD in parapsychology from Berkeley as a result of this synchronicity, starting him on his quest for other things happening. So he didn't see more, but the more you see, usually, the more you will see, because you become sensitized to the fact that they're happening pretty commonly. Weird stuff happens quite commonly. So under what conditions, Gloria asked, are likely to increase the frequency of meaningful coincidences? Well, paying attention to them helps. The three observations I've made, and I think I could find this in what Jung also wrote, is that high need, when you have a need. And when you're talking about resonance, you're talking about sending an energy signature out into the psychosphere. And sometimes it finds what it's resonating with. It could be harmonic resonance, not the same frequency, but harmonically related. And that can then pop that thing that's related to somebody maybe to come into your life. And I think that's what happened with.
I'm thinking of it in terms of what Jennifer was saying about can we train our minds, and we were talking about the World Wide Web, and I'm sure Gloria can attest that I'm terrible with the World Wide Web. I have no idea how all this stuff works. And I was thinking about that when Jennifer brought up the psychosphere, and I thought of biofeedback, and maybe it's something that takes a heck of a lot of time and energy and concentration to hone your ability. What do you think about that, Bernie?
I think you're honing your ability. I think you're honing your ability. I think what you're doing and what you're saying, at least the way I hear it, is that you're imagining being able to do find the resonance that fits for you at that moment and be able to manifest something. And I think that's what you have in mind. And I think that's very important for us to imagine what we're looking for. It's not enough to just imagine it. The secret was caught up in just thinking about it. We'll do it. No, that's not enough. You got to do something too. But what you're doing is imagining that you can create a certain energy signature, a resonating signature, and then send it out, and you'll get back what that thing finds. And that's one of the fun things. Maybe you've heard Rumi say it. What you're seeking is also seeking you, and that's so nice. It's really nice. It's so nice when that happens.
Yeah. So would you like to run through the various types of coincidences? Like, what is the difference between serendipity and synchronicity?
You read the book. Why don't you do it?
But I'm not the author.
That's right. You're not the author. Yeah. You're not the
I'm not
author.
the expert.
I'm the expert, ladies and gentlemen, whether you knew it or not. I am I do know a lot about this stuff. I put in my 10,000 hours. So I've gotten to a place where I can talk about it. But I part of the reason I asked, because I've done that several times now, as you can imagine. And it's fun for me to hear how other people think about what I've written. But I'll take you off the hook for this one. Synchronicity, if you could read this more in my book. Synchronicity is a term invented by Carl Gustav Jung, who I hadn't heard of for many years, that I was aware of coincidences. I didn't know the term synchronicity particularly. I just knew that I ran into a lot of coincidences. And the synchronicity for Jung, who was a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, and a mystic, it tended to be around spiritual, psychological, and interpersonal things. So synchronicity was, for Jung, a way of becoming who you really are. And synchronicity is kind of like a psychotherapeutic event that it's conspiring with not another person, but with your surroundings to help you evolve to find out who you are, spiritually, psychologically, and interpersonally. And synchronicity tends to be a mind object thing, where what you think about and what's out in the world matches each other. And I can't tell you how much fun it is to think that our minds are mirrored by our environment sometimes, not a lot, not all the time, but it happens all the time. It happens sometimes. And I love those. And somebody I met at dance I really liked went to Bali, and she was writing a Facebook reports, a travelogue on what she was doing there. And she put in there sometime for some reason she put in what's happening around you is a mirror of what's happening in you on this Bali trip. And I was like editing this book that I'm just about finished. A friend of mine's editing it, and the book is called "The Adventures of Dr. Coincidence."
Hmm.
In case you didn't know it, I'm Dr. Coincidence, and it's the story of my life as told through coincidences. So I was editing the section of my book in which I was describing how my problems, not just me, it's the therapist, other therapists too, but your problems as a therapist walk into your office. So there's a mind mirroring in therapy sometimes. So as I was editing that, she sends this, she sends this Facebook thing about mind mirroring in her environment. So I wrote to Leslie and said what I've just told you, and she understood synchronicity. And it was a nice moment with her because I had been dancing with her and we'd had a great time. And then she left town, but this was kind of a dance where we were mirroring each other's minds. And this is like my mind was what I was thinking was mirrored in what she was writing, and what she was writing was mirrored in her mind was mirrored in what I was editing. And that's what Jung tended to be about, is a mental event and an objective event.
There's
And
the
so,
wonderful story of the scarab beetle with his patient, very famous story.
I'm so tired of that story, I can't tell you.
It's in your book.
It's in there, but
I've read it
I'm really
before.
really had enough of that one.
Yeah.
So it's been told enough, and there's a lot of holes in that story that don't get paid attention to. But the basic idea was that Jung was dealing with a patient who was stuck in the retort of her rationality, the iron retort, and she wouldn't stop being rational. And she kept coming to therapy, but he wanted to bang on that retort. So he was getting mad, and she brought in a dream about a piece of jewelry. A golden scarab was the piece of jewelry, and as she was describing the dream, there's the dream. It's in her mind. Jung hears a tapping on his window pane, which kind of reminds me of Santa Claus coming along, in case some of you know that story. And so he comes along. So Santa Claus it's not Santa Claus, it's a scarab-like beetle of that's in the spring rather, in Geneva, where he had his practice. These rose Schaefers are hanging around a lot of roses in the spring. So I think Jung knew what was at the window, and a lot of Jungians want to think that scarab-like beetle, and that beetle is a lot like a scarab. You look at the pictures; they're similar. Like to think that scarab just emerged out of the collective unconscious. No, it probably didn't, because there's a lot of them out there right now. And why was one knocking on the window? Well, they probably did it before. It's not just bugs do that on windows sometimes.
It was the timing. It was the timing that.
Well, the timing
Think of it as connecting the dots.
the timing is very
Awareness.
important. The
Mhm.
timing is very important. And Jung needed it right then. And I'm just giving you some background of this. And the timing was just right. She says it, the beetle's there, and he goes to the window and gets the rose Schaefer and presents it to the young woman who just told the dream. And he says, "Here's your scarab." And that did to her what I like to call ontological shock. Ontological shock is when something happens that disturbs your worldview, or what you used to think happens isn't the way it actually is. So that broke her open. And Jung said not much else after that about the case, except that she therapy proceeded well because she apparently became more open to him. A lot's been written about that story. If any of you want to see Eric Wargo's second book on time and time loops, he has more information on the patient and more information about Jung's thinking about her, but he's mostly about the patient. So there's a lot there. But the important thing about that scarab story, Gloria, and for the rest of you, is without whether he's conscious of it or not. Here is Carl Gustav Jung handing this scarab, which is a symbol of transformation, Egyptian symbol of transformation, to this highly rational woman. And I hope you can see that he's creating a mythological story where Carl Jung is presenting synchronicity, again, an agent of change, of transformation, like the beetle, to the Western world. And indeed, that's what I'm helping to keep going forward, is that it's changing the way we look at reality. Synchronicity does. So that's the beauty of that story, however it happened. It's a mythological presentation of what synchronicity is intended to do for the Western mind.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different explanations that you mention in your book that people have for why or how a meaningful coincidence happens. And I'd like to maybe run through some of those. And also just to say that I think the mistake is thinking that any one of them is the only explanation to the exclusion of the others. You know, it's like saying, today is Friday. No, today is September. Today is August. No, today is the 17th, right? They're all right. That, you know, they all feed into, they're all possibilities, possible explanation for any particular synchronicity. But do you want to mention a few of them?
I've mentioned the three basic ones.
Okay.
And then the rest of them are the rest of them, and even the ones I'm going to mention, are a variable application to different coincidences. The popular explanation among materialistic science is it's random. Now, random is funny. It's hard to prove the universe is random, especially when there looks like so much cohesion among and between everything, especially when, if it's true, and a lot of people are questioning it, it began with a big bang. It means it's all started together, so it's probably still together in some form if the big bang is true. And there's a lot of other ideas about it, but if we take the big bang as having something to do with it, this whole thing started as one little intense micro something or other, and then expanded. So everything's got to be connected in some form or another, and it can't be random. But the random guys, the statisticians, and the people who want to be materialistic will say it's random. I'll say that we should pay attention to the idea that many coincidences are low probability events. And the important thing about that is that the lower the probability, the less likely it's random. And that's just kind of a sense that I have and a lot of other people have. And that's what makes us say, what are the odds of that? And that's so one cause, one explanation is random chance, whatever words you want to use for that. The other end of it is God, universe. Those are the two most popular explanations for meaningful coincidences. And there, as Gloria mentioned, there's a lot of people who like to have one explanation.
Yeah.
One size fits all. It's too hard to think in multiple vectors as influencing something, but that's reality. It's usually not just one thing. It's this cause and effect thing is useful sometimes, but with coincidence, there's multiple variables that come into making it happen. And there is a probability of every coincidence. It might be hard to measure. That doesn't make it random. And on the other end, God and universe are favorites because, again, you have one explanation. And a lot of people like that. And if you are religious or spiritual in some senses, you like to say the universe did it. Now, the word universe used to mean the physical universe that astronomers examine, but it also has a secondary meaning that sounds a lot like God. The universe is talking to me. It's rather than saying God, say the universe. And the idea is the universe is intelligent, and there's a lot of people writing about that. And that intelligence is speaking to me. I said, man, that's kind of a lot of stuff. There's got to be some intervening variables between God and me. I mean,
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe that's what I think, and some of you might not. What do you think of that intervening variable thing? Those of you out there in radio land.
Before you answer, unmute. Okay. Anybody want to say something about that?
I think it's important to question and to be curious. I think curiosity does not kill anybody. It's our motivation, and it's healthy. And I think of it in terms of Temple Grandin and what she did with the poor cows, but only in a healthy way. It's good to seek, and maybe questioning is sufficient during life. Questioning is adequate and wholesome.
Oh, Chris, you are just right on, at least for me. I mean, a lot of people say all you need is love. I'm saying you need love and curiosity because the curiosity gets you to be wondering, and there's nothing better than wondering and being struck by being it's a wonder of what happened. All this stuff is so much fun to figure out. And so I'm at the learning entertainment interface as much as I can be. I like to have a good time learning, and I like to learn having a good time. And curiosity is so very important. I'm so glad you bring that up, Chris, because it doesn't get mentioned often enough as fundamental to our existence. Curiosity is good for you. Curiosity is good for your health.
I'd like to add a little addendum. I don't see anybody else unmuted yet, but I think that the love goes hand in hand with the curiosity, because otherwise, if it's not loving curiosity, you end up with militarized curiosity, which can be like Robert and I's shared nightmare.
I don't get
that. Our shared nightmare had to do with torture, military experimentation on that. So curiosity has to have a loving component for it to be wholesome and lead in a positive direction. Otherwise, misguided and destructive.
Yeah, what she's talking about is they were curious as to how long a dog would live if you shot him here or there, or with this type of bullet or that type of bullet. And the reason was they wanted to find out what they should shoot the enemy with, because they didn't want to kill him outright. They wanted him to suffer, go to a hospital, and take up energy, So it was curiosity. What will happen if we use this type of bullet as opposed to that type? But it wasn't wholesome. That's what she said.
I use the word love. I'm not afraid of the word love.
It was unnecessary investigation, right? And experimentation. If you're curious, but your curiosity is going to, hurt someone or the planet, how much can we destroy the environment before it threatens us, right?
It's like the 2 bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nobody talks about why there were 2. And the reason there were 2 is because the fellas had made 2 toys to play with, and they wanted to compare, what was it, fission and fusion or something, and see if there was a difference in destruction, and let the consequences fall where they may.
Mm-hmm.
That's not wholesome curiosity.
Right, right.
That's a that's a really very good point.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you both of you emphasized that.
I'd like to hear from these other people.
There's a cat walking around in somebody's house. I know
That's
that.
That's I wanted to, that could be a good segue into another thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the shadow.
Hold on just a second on that, Gloria. Please hold on just a second, because part of the reason I like doing this stuff is because I learn from it. It's not just me talking. And I've heard myself talk a few times now. It's 80 podcasts and my own 110 that I do. I've done them. So hearing love and curiosity, I had them somewhat separate. Now you've been able to show me, Chris and Robert, the curiosity that's destructive. Nagasaki and Hiroshima being a great example of that, and the dogs another. But I would like to put love and curiosity together even more, not as separate, but as you were talking, what I think, like interpersonal love, which is what I think we need a lot more of. We don't know how to love really very well, generally speaking, that we can talk about a lot of mystical things and everything's one and we're interconnected, but we don't get along with each other as a species, and human beings are a pernicious race of vermin, as Jonathan Swift once said. We don't get along with each other very, yeah, that one.
He's going to argue with you. He thinks we're pretty decent.
Well, I think there is a decentness in us. There's no question about that. But with the decentness that I'm trying to be able to put together from what we were talking about here is curiosity about the other person, is a way of augmenting love between 2 people. Being curious about the experience and the thinking of the other person connects us. It's not just, I love you, I want to know more about you. I keep getting to know you, getting to know more about you is an ongoing process that requires curiosity. So I think the interpersonal love is augmented by curiosity about the other person.
And it dispels judgment. It dispels projection.
You're just trying to see what's in there.
Yeah. So if you're curious, you're not judging. If somebody rubs you the wrong way and your knee-jerk reaction is to, judge them in some way or project all kinds of, meanness onto them. If you switch to curiosity, why did they, what's going on for them? Maybe they're having a bad day, whatever. If you switch to curiosity, it dispels that tendency to judge.
Yeah.
So, Bernie, would you talk about the shadow side of coincidence? When you talk about how not all coincidences are positive in experience and outcome, and how some people come to therapy because they are overwhelmed by coincidences, like an onslaught of coincidences. You talked about the bipolar, the tendency of when a person is manic, that the manic mind can produce a barrage of synchronicities or coincidences. And there is an example that I noted down, let's see, page 90. Sometimes a barrage of coincidences becomes part of a psychotic episode. I've interviewed several people who during their manic episodes had paranormal and mystical-like experiences while also not being able to function adequately in ordinary reality. And you talk about a psychiatrist who was also bipolar, James Williford, and during the manic episodes, he used his mind's eye to look at the past, present, and future. Like a video with occasional sound, he could be telepathic, clairvoyant, and predict the future. One day he needed a comb and saw in his mind's eye a yellow comb in the drawer of a desk in an office he had not been in. He walked down the hall, pulled open the drawer, and found the yellow comb he had seen in his mind's eye. He requires several medications to keep the mania and depression in control. But he says when he's manic, he has tons of synchronicities or coincidences, and when he's depressed, he doesn't have any. So what's that all about?
Well, you said a whole lot right there.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, but I can start with the end of it. In order to have a meaningful coincidence happen, you have to have a thought that matches out in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
If you got no thoughts going on in your head, you're not going to have a match because you don't have anything going on. That's depression. If you're manic, you're going to have lots of them. So it's going to, this bingo, you're going to hit a bunch of stuff out there that's similar to what you're passing through your mind. So that's a simple answer to a simple question, really. That's how it works. You got to have matching. And if there's nothing in there, you're not going to match. But you mentioned a shadow part of meaningful coincidences. One of my favorite things sometimes is having somebody call me and say, I'm overwhelmed by coincidences. Can you help me? And I like doing that, but I like doing it in a formal way, and I charge people for it. So there's some kind of like professional relationship established. And it's just because it's kind of professional, but I say it, I don't do much of the psychotherapy part of it. And I've had at least 3 people that I've done coincidence counseling with who have been bothered by meaningful coincidence. One of them you mentioned, and it's described in my Psychology Today blog, which it's called something like being overwhelmed with a flood of coincidences getting into your life. And this woman from Ohio had a flood of coincidences, and being as she was from Ohio, Columbus, she for some reason went to a spring football game, and she heard some guy talking about my podcast with 50,000 people in the stands. She hears this, so she hears about me and connection with Jung, so that got her to contact me. She drives from Ohio to Charlottesville, and we spend 3 days, a couple hours each day, trying to figure out about what's going on with her. She was a teacher. She was a very well integrated person, but she was flooded by too many coincidences. So I helped her figure out the meaning of them to her, and a lot of it was she got to get out of this marriage she was in. So one of the things that increases coincidence besides need is being in a destabilizing situation when you're going through a life stressor. And that starts with the death of a spouse as perhaps the worst one. Other deaths, even going on vacations, are disturbing. And having marital discord disturbs the usual way we think about our lives. There's no longer a steadiness and predictability. And that led her to have a lot of coincidences until I helped her stabilize what they seemed to be about. Another person was living a very, very good life. Her husband and had a lot of money, and she did too, and things were going very well. And then she does something crazy for her, and she took a trip to Asia, and a lot of weird coincidences started happening to her there. And again, travel, especially to a new place, can increase the likelihood of meaningful coincidences. So she was disturbed by them and had some when she got back. And then after 3 sessions, she wasn't having them anymore. No coincidences. She didn't like them because they were the ontological shock I was mentioning. They were breaking up her view of the world. And she didn't like that. So she wanted things to be back the way they were. And my last session with her, they were. And I don't know, that meaning she wasn't having coincidence experiences anymore. And the third one was too hard and too specific to her to describe, but she was creating a lot of problems for herself with taking drugs that she shouldn't have been taking, psilocybin for depression, and it made her crazy enough to get put into a psychiatric place where they did disturbing things to her, and telepathic, clairvoyant things were happening. And she tried to tell her lawyer about what was happening with her. And her lawyer thought she was crazy by talking about synchronicity kinds of things. So she needed to have me stabilize her belief in her own experiences, which I was able to do after about 3 sessions.
Interesting. So what about people who have a coincidence and don't follow it? Like if they're clear that the coincidence is pointing them in a certain direction, but they refuse to heed it, do the coincidences stop at that point, or will they increase?
Well, that I don't know if they increase or stop. I don't know that. But what I do know is that one of the key ideas to be able to convey to you, and you may know this, each of you, is that coincidences are not commands.
Mm-hmm.
They're not commands. They are suggestions.
Right.
And maybe it's happened to me, but maybe it's happened to you too, where somebody really cared about you and wanted the best for you, made a suggestion to you that turned out really awful.
Mm-hmm.
I've had enough of those, so I have to listen to what my sons are trying to tell me and be careful about following what they're suggesting. And they're not the only ones. There are other people who have done the same thing. I've had therapists tell me things that no, I'm not going to do that. That it's you have to judge for yourself. So earlier on, Gloria, we were talking about what are the explanations for meaningful coincidences. The one that gets missed the most is your own agency. That you have something to do with it happening. I think Chris is quite aware of that, and now taking advantage of that by trying to make some of these things happen. Because once you accept your agency, as you know, assertiveness, that's an important thing too. In coincidences, if you accept your agency, then you say, oh, hey, maybe I can do some stuff with this. It just doesn't have to happen to me, even though there are hard times when it does happen to me, but I didn't know I was doing anything, but you probably were, but you didn't know it. And then you try to figure out what it is that you were doing without knowing that you were doing it. And then you maybe try to then do that more consciously. So the agency is a critical part of the explanation for coincidences.
Sharon,
I'd like to give you an explanation or an example. This only involved me peripherally, but 94-year-old Emma, a friend of mine, she had been very sensitive all her life. And when her dog died, she didn't know it had died, and it wandered through the house and then disappeared before her eyes. And the guy next door died and wandered in, and she was always seeing these things. They upset her terribly. She was terrified of them, and they happened to her all her life. Also, when her son was 4 years old, he had died. Little Ziggy had died. He'd been hit by a car. 94-year-old Emma was in ICU and was scared to death of dying. I mean, she was white as a ghost and holding on and struggling to survive. And she had been in ICU many times. And I said, but Emma, aren't you looking forward to seeing Ziggy? and she relaxed, and you could just see it on her face. She relaxed into it, and 20 minutes later she was dead.
She let go. She let go.
She wasn't afraid anymore.
Sharon has her hand up. You need to unmute, Sharon.
Yes,
Sherilyn.
red microphone, yellow.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, are Gloria or Bernie, are either of you familiar with Andrew Holisek?
I know the name, but I haven't followed his work.
Okay. He's written some books on like dream yoga. He does a lot with Tibetan Buddhism, etc. So anyway, one place where I saw him, he said, and I'm just curious Bernie's thoughts on this. He said, if there aren't synchronicities in his life, he used the term synchronicities, he starts to get worried because it makes him feel like he's kind of off track or off his path. So I just wanted to kind of offer that up and see, Bernie, what your thoughts were on thinking about it from that perspective.
Yeah, that's I've heard that before. It's a good question. I'm a big believer that this reality we're in has a lot of polarities, as yin and yang tell us, a lot of polarities. And one of the polarities goes like this, a sine wave. That the sine wave is one of those fairly enduring concepts or patterns that are part of this reality. Sound waves, light waves, electromagnetic energy, among many, many other things, have sine wave forms. So that you expect that there'll be times when there's a lot of synchronicities and a time when there's not that many. Things change. The only constant is change, and things change. So part of life is having a lot of coincidences and then not having a lot of them. If you have too many of them, and you have them all the time, that can make you crazy. And if you don't have any of them, then you don't know what you're missing. And what this guy was doing, and I know somebody who had the same experience, he became worried when his old friend Synchronicity wasn't around anymore. And guess what that does? It chases them away. It chases them away. That means he needs to calm down and not keep looking for affirmations from around him, but it's really inside of him that correlates with outside of him. So he's getting too anxious. If you get too anxious, too depressed, you're going to not be able to help them happen. A certain amount of emotion does have them happen. What the most common use of meaningful coincidences is to make you feel you're on the right path. And it's like getting a pat on the back or a pat on the head by somebody. It makes you feel good. That's why a lot of people like angel numbers, because they show up and they say, I'm good. Well, I'm not sure just what about that, but if it makes you feel good, okay. But I'm more interested in getting people to wonder about angel numbers and other coincidences. They're an open door into wondering about them. But anyway, that's Sharon. That's my thought about this guy and this other guy I knew. I said, take it easy. They'll come back. You got to be able to be more in your own flow before you're going to start seeing more of them.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? We are now in question mode. Well, I can read, if no one has a question right now, I'd love to read one of these. The 6 puzzling cases in the back of the book, towards the end of the book, were just fascinating. So let's see, which one should I read? How about philosopher Sharon Hewitt? Oh, Sharon Hewitt Rollett recounted the following coincidence. 2015, on a weekend getaway in Pennsylvania with some college friends, Sharon was thinking about her ex-fiancé with whom she had lost contact. He was living in France, where they had spent time together. Both the ex and France were heavily on her mind. She admitted that arguments, quote, arguments with my current husband had been on the increase because of my obsession with France and my unresolved feelings about my ex-fiancé, unquote. As she and one of her friends were searching for a supermarket to buy provisions, this is in Pennsylvania, right, for their evening meal, her friend who was driving pulled out her smartphone and gave it to Sharon, who asked the phone's voice assistant for the nearest grocery store. The phone displayed a list of grocery stores in the immediate vicinity. When Sharon tapped map to find the closest one, the stores it displayed were all labeled E. Leclerc, the name of a French supermarket chain. One of the towns was Carhaix, a town in western Brittany, France. Her college friend had never before used her phone for directions in France. As Sharon later learned by reading her ex's blog, he had been less than 2 miles from Carhaix that same day. The French GPS incident kicked off a month of coincidences that eventually led to a talk with her ex that led to resolution of her feelings about him and a renewed closeness with her husband. So what occurred to me in terms of, what could have been the instrument of that synchronicity, I thought that had to be, her guide or her ex-fiance's guide or, spirit intervention. Spirits have an easy time with technology, with electronics, manipulating them. And so that's what came to my mind. But of course, it could be something else. So I liked that one. So let's talk a little bit about technology. What role would you say technology plays in coincidence, Bernie?
The idea we talked about before about technomimicry, that the technology mimics our own hidden potentials. You mentioned earlier the internet, the World Wide Web, and the technology of trees, as Chris was talking about. The Wood Wide Web is a metaphor for the World Wide Web. That's what's fun about seeing as above, so below. I mean, it's too obvious to not pay attention to that. The patterns are similar. I think the World Wide Web creates a scaffolding that will allow us to communicate in the way Chris was talking about, in a more voluntary way with each other. And we will do that through this mental atmosphere, this geomagnetic field of where we are in. And by the way, the Schumann resonance creating the variations, the harmonics of hertz from about 7.8 to about 60. That's about what the Schumann resonance does. Human brain goes down a little further. But if you keep in mind that we evolved within this Schumann resonance activity, so our brains picked up what was going on around us and connected with it. So that's how we got our brain electrical activity. It's been programmed by what had been around us previously, probably through other animals, and then as we evolved, we came to that. So that's that technology of being able to put an EEG on our heads and then measure the Schumann resonance helps us see that our minds are immersed in this magnetic field, geomagnetic field, or the psychosphere. So that what we create is mirroring what we are having in our own minds. It's kind of a generalized synchronicity that we create something because it's in us, but we don't know it until we see the mirror of it outside of us. Same thing as looking in the mirror for yourself. And one example of that, oh, okay, Chris, I can go know what I'm going to say.
Is that how biofeedback works when they put all those electrodes on and they have you watch a screen doing something with waves and trying to get you to make the waves do something or other? I forget what.
Yeah, you're trying to match. You're trying to be able to match the state of consciousness that the waves represent in your brain. So you learn how to be able to make your brain behave that way. I think it's a good. I'm glad you bring that up because it's kind of helps me think about some of the stuff I'm trying to be able to think about here. But I want to bring up another variation on technology. I call it human internal GPS. Human internal GPS. And a common meaningful coincidence is showing up where you need to be without knowing how you got there. You just kind of like, I think I'll go this way instead of that way, and that way instead of this way, and weird stuff happens that suits what you're up to.
I have a wonderful example of that from your book, if you'd like me to read it.
Go ahead.
It says, one study participant told the story about their near suicide. There was a very dark period in my late teens, a confused time to say the least. I cannot explain the rationalization, or rather, I should state there was none. I couldn't seem to withstand all the suffering in the world, and one afternoon I took my dad's gun, got in my car, and drove to an isolated place on the lake. The intention was to end my own life. I sat there with gun in hand without truly understanding why. It was as if I didn't have any clue how I managed to arrive at this moment in time. But as tears slowly came down my cheeks, I heard the sound of another car pulling up beside me, and my brother stepped out of the car, asking me to hand him the gun. I was breathless. I was totally shocked. All I could do is to ask him how on earth he knew I was feeling this way. How did he know I even had this gun? And most important, how did he find me? He said he had no answers. He didn't have any idea why he got into his car. He didn't know where he was driving, nor why he was going there, or what he was supposed to do when he arrived. One mind picked up the distress of another mind and intuitively knew the location and how to get there. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Very uncrazy, it turns out. It's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Being in the right place at the right time. There's two parts to this, and you've read some of that, but just emphasize. The first thing is picking up the distress of a loved one at a distance. You've heard that already. Simultaneity, picking up his distress or her distress. And then the weird thing is being able to get there. And he'd never been there before. And I don't know if she'd been there before. So he got to a place he'd never been before. So he's driving blind, but it's as if he's guided by some internal GPS to be able to get there.
Wow.
And that's how that works is something like what Chris was talking about. So I, in my sometimes stupidity and sometimes great wisdom, became curious about if I could like enact a human GPS thing consciously, this kind of way Chris was talking about. Could I show up at a person's house when that person was coming out of the house? That was and these are two people that I knew pretty well. I've been romantically involved with each of them. One of them was over and the other one is kind of getting over, but I still knew them. So the first one, after dance, I just said, I'll go over there, and drove over there, and nobody was outside. And so I just waited for a little bit, and I was about to go, and the car light goes on, and she gets out of the car. She was getting some record, some CD from the car. So she was outside when I showed up. And there was only a small time window for that to happen. So I told her what I was doing. It was kind of fun to see each other. And then I went home. So another one, I don't know how later, I'd been to her house a bunch of times too. I know how to get there. And so I decided to let myself be guided. Like I went to 3 or 4 other houses that I had visited people in, and waited to be told about when I could move to the next house and when I can go to the next one. And when I go, I thought this is pretty stupid, I thought, but I was still letting myself be guided by something. So I took for the 4th one, which was the person I was trying to be outside of when she walked out. I got lost. I mean, I took a wrong turn, and then finally got back to the right place, and then got to outside of her house, and her car was there. So I figured she was probably inside. So I just waited there for about a minute. The door opens of the house, and she comes out. She gets in the car. Now, she was not happy that I was doing this. People have called that, what do you call it?
Stalking.
Yeah,
Stalking.
stalking. I call that stalking. I did. It looked like stalking, and that really wasn't what bothered her so much. Is that she was like in a hurry to get someplace, and it was late, so she didn't want to bother with me at that time. But I've been warned that it looks like stalking, so you better be careful how you present this. This will be in my next book, the book, The Adventures of Dr. Coincidence. So, Chris, I was able to do consciously what seems like a subconscious human GPS thing. I knew what I was doing. I just didn't know the timing, and I had to be guided by the timing. That's a hard one to know, but I was still allowing myself consciously to be guided to get to these 2 places when they came out. So the timing, again, was pretty important.
Does anyone have a synchronicity story they would like to?
Question: has anyone had any experiences with orbs? I didn't even know what it was, and I hunted around and came up with the word orb, but I had no experience to my recollection.
A lot of people see them on, photographs, digital photographs.
Oh yeah, I've got that, but this was in person.
You have?
I'll tell you, it's very brief. My husband's 14-year-old cousin was visiting from Sweden, didn't speak a lot of English, and we had him at our nature preserve, and he had never seen fireflies. So I took him out at dusk to look for fireflies. We went to the end of the porch, and this blue light, about the size of a baseball, was in the grass. And we looked at it, and it took off and went around the house, and it was glowing about this big. And he said, firefly. And I said, not a firefly. And for about 10 years, we referred to it as not a firefly until I heard the word orb. But I don't understand it. My husband is a sculptor, and he's made sculptures of orbs since then, but we still don't have any clue what that is, or I'm imagining interdimensional or something like that. Does anybody have any ideas? Bernie?
I've never heard of that.
Oh, I've heard of them, and a patient of mine not only saw them but took pictures of them, and I don't know what to make out of them. I haven't had experiences myself with them, but it's another illustration that something else is going on out there than we are being told. What that is, I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, one possibility could be like some kind of light phenomenon, where, I mean, if it was not tangible, if it was just the color blue and the roundness that you saw, I don't know how dense it looked. Could be.
It was dense in the middle and then glowing. and it was blue. And he went in and explained it to his mother, described it in Swedish. And I explained it to Robert what I had seen. And then they compared and said, oh yeah, they saw the same thing. But since then I took note, and I've taken lots of photos, as you had mentioned, Gloria. And I noticed that if everyone's having a joyous time and I snap a picture, it's full of orbs. And it's a moment later when I say everybody smile and take a second picture, there are no orbs. It's like the orbs are there during the elation and the festivity, and when people stop to focus and their ego gets in the way, the orbs vanish. And I've seen that. I've got so many diptychs of orbs, no orbs, including right here looking out the window. There was a bear, and the bear and I caught each other's eyes, and I snapped a picture, and it's loaded. You can hardly see the bear for all the orbs. And then he hopped down when he realized he was being watched and walked away, and I took another picture, and there are none.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. I don't know. I've seen many
It's
pictures.
fun stuff. I don't know what it is, but I sure enjoy it.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of pictures with orbs in them, but I don't know what they signify exactly.
I have a picture that was taken by one of my students in philosophy. His grandfather had died, and they had a photographer come in and take pictures of the funeral, and then they gave the pictures to his father. That's his grandmother at the gravesite the next day. They gave pictures to his father, and my student, his name was Leon. He saw this picture here in the wastebasket, and he said, "What's this, Dad?" And he said, "Well, that's one that didn't come out." And what happened was, after all of the funeral and everything, the photographer got the grandmother to go to the gravesite the next day and have a picture taken at the gravesite. And when she was there, she didn't see this, but the photographer's camera, whatever it was, picked it up. Now, most likely explanation would be it was the way the sun hit it, But he said, "Wow," and he grabbed it out of the wastebasket and he framed it up. And then we were talking about this kind of strange phenomena in a philosophy class one day. So he brought that in and he gave it to me. So that's how I got it. But anyway, that's off the track from where you guys want to go. But that's what an orb looks like.
Okay. So does anyone have a story of a synchronicity that they'd like to share?
Come on, Pat.
No, I don't have a story.
No? Okay.
I've had a few, and what I can say is now I'm more aware when something happens and it's like, oh, wait. And so I now understand synchronicity much better. Let's just say I'm more aware of it when it happens.
I see. Yeah.
So I think when you become more aware and your spirituality grows, I think it actually happens. I shouldn't say it happens more often. I'm just more aware of it now.
Okay.
Recognize it. Right.
Well, I can tell a story from when I was 8 years old. My mother was a singer, and she traveled all over the world. And every country she went to where she sang, she would bring me a doll, like a show doll with the indigenous costume, folk costume, that kind of thing. And so I had this beautiful collection of dolls that I couldn't play with because they were too delicate. And I loved them. I mean, I thought they were beautiful, but I secretly wanted for Christmas a Raggedy Andy doll. I didn't know about Raggedy Ann at that time. I knew about Raggedy Andy, and I wanted a doll that I could just play with, but I didn't want to tell my parents because I figured my mother would think either she would think that I didn't appreciate the dolls that she brought me, which I did, or that I just had terrible taste, and so I thought, but I don't have to tell them because Santa Claus is going to know what I want. I don't have to tell my parents. He knows what everybody wants. So I can just, keep quiet about it. So Christmas came and went, and there was no Raggedy Andy doll. And I was disappointed. But a week later, we went to see these very close friends of my mother's. Brazilian composer by the name of Villa-Lobos was a very good friend of hers. And I loved him because he loved kids and he was so much fun. And so we went to his house, he and his wife, Minjia, and we were talking, sitting there, and he hands me a present and he says, "This is for you. This is our Christmas present for you." And I open it up and it was the Raggedy Andy doll that I so much wanted. And from that moment on, I thought he must be magic, or either that or he knows Santa Claus. And Santa Claus forgot to drop it off. And so he gave it to him to give to me because I was just so thrilled. I had my Raggedy Andy doll. So that was my first synchronicity that I remember.
I have one that I'll share.
Sure.
Yeah, it's pretty short. I would say my spiritual journey, for lack of a better description, started like in 2016. And I used to go to a local YMCA to swim a lot. And as a fundraiser, like twice a year, they would have a used book sale. So people would donate books and then they would sell them for 50 cents or $1, maybe $5, and they would make money off of it. So I had arrived for my swimming, and I guess I had done the swimming, and I'm on my way out, and the book sale has wrapped up. And actually, let me pause. So there's the YMCA piece, right, in this book sale. And I was also experiencing a lot of kind of muscle pain at the time. So I was seeing a massage therapist like monthly. And she was very talented, very spiritual. And I think she was from Colombia, maybe. And she had talked to me about Joseph Campbell and his books and his videos. And she had encouraged me, to watch some of them and to kind of become familiar with his work. And I had seen her once and she mentioned it. And then I think she even wrote it down for me, like on a Post-it note. And then the next time I saw her, she said, "Oh, did you look into Joseph Campbell?" And I said, "No, I haven't yet, but I kept it, I meant to." And she might have asked me one more time. And then she kind of quit following up. I think she thought, I'm kind of nagging her. But then I'm at the Y, and there's this book sale, and they're actually wrapping up the book sale. So they've taken the shelves down. They've restacked the boxes of books. I think what they do is they hold on to them until the next sale, and then they put them out again. And I'm in a rush. And as I walk by this box of books, on the top is this Joseph Campbell book, The Power of Myth. And I thought, well, I have to buy this. I mean, it's just like, it's like the, universe has like said to me, she has asked you about this 3 times and you haven't bothered to act on it. Like, go watch a video, just do something. It's like, okay, fine. We're just going to put this book out for you. So I picked it up and I went to the desk and I said, I know the book sale's over, but I'd like to buy this book. And she said, "How about $1?" And I said, "Okay." So she sold it to me for $1 and I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I started reading it thinking, oh, this is going to like change my life. There must be a reason I found this book. And it wasn't that earth shattering. I mean, I enjoyed it. So I don't really know. I don't know. It just felt like some element was just kind of having fun with me. Like, you've been told 3 times, like someone you like and trust has suggested this and you haven't acted on it. Like, we're just going to put it right in front of you, and make you, it felt like someone was kind of having fun with me. That's how it felt. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have a synchronicity story?
Voltaire said that God is a comedian playing in front of an audience, is afraid to laugh.
The audience is afraid to laugh.
Yeah, that was Voltaire said that.
Oh, Voltaire said that. Yeah, that's funny. Anybody else? No. Bernie, would you like to tell us?
Jennifer.
Oh, Jen, you have one. Okay, unmute, please. Oh, there's something in the chat too. Let me see what's in the chat.
Oh, Gloria, what you were saying, how it lights up the person who's speaking. If you go to view and put it on gallery, it won't do that.
I don't want gallery. I want speaker view. For the recording, I want speaker view. Yeah. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, I should be unmuted by now.
You
okay. I just wanted to talk about, I won't get into a long story because I don't think we'll have enough time, but I've noticed there have been people in my life that were very, they drove my life forward in ways that connected over many years. And I wondered if Bernard has had people experience things like that, where you form a relationship with someone that could be through business or friendship or relatives. And then you notice, this has caused me to do a lot of thinking about a chain reaction in my case with one specific person that drove my life forward through unexpected serious illness, through started as a business relationship, but went through revelation of what I should do about a serious illness. And then in the end, something else that was life-changing for me. So it was like a triple play that happened out of forming one relationship with the person on several levels. And I'm wondering, have you found that there's some cohesiveness between the things that have happened, including one person which was not necessarily someone you had a serious, like a physical relationship or a romantic relationship with, but just this one thread that kept popping up that helped you come forward in your consciousness or your health. Have you noticed that stream with an individual?
Yeah. I can't think of anybody now as you're telling me, because I have a little different way of a different form of that. But by the way, what's in the chat is very consistent with what we're doing right now. Is we tell each other coincidence stories at the Coincidence Cafe. The Coincidence Cafe meets the third Saturday of every month on Zoom at 11 a.m. Eastern time for about an hour and a half. And the link for the registration is in the chat right now. And if you click on that, you'll now, because it'll go away when we stop. If you click on that now, you'll have it. And it's a very simple thing to fill out. And you'll be notified every month, maybe like today or tomorrow, because we're having one on Saturday. You'll be notified and you'll have the link to be able to get onto it. And some of you are really into this stuff, so it might be a place that you can experience a lot of meaningful coincidences, because they happen at the Coincidence Cafe. When you start generating a group of people who are interested in coincidences, coincidences happen. Good. Coincidences happen that are pretty funny, that happen among and between people, and sometimes they go a little further. So please just click on it, and if you're interested, and then look at it again, and it'll tell you a little bit more about it. And you can do what we're doing right now, which is telling each other coincidence stories. And as for what Jennifer was talking.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And what Jennifer was talking about was one person not necessarily having a romantic or any other kind of necessary relationship, but you had a relationship with this person. Something happened at the beginning, and you kept coming back, he or she, into your life in ways that were quite formative for you. I think that's probably something I haven't paid attention to, but intuitively I know that happens. Because we can be in and out of each other's lives in ways that are quite compelling for at least one of us. The way the kind of thing I do is kind of related to that, but it's I swing from vine to vine in the coincidence jungle. I go from not the same person, but one person to the next person to the next person. And other people do this. A donor I mentioned calls it on the jungle gym, which is what I used to call it, when you go from one thing to the next in a playground, reach for the next, reach for the next. I just went for the Tarzan analogy, swinging from vine to vine. And one person said, swinging divine, divine. Kind of you get a little spiritual with that, and that's my variation on that. But one person swinging, several people swinging. To me, it's a similar dance.
Bernie, would you like to say anything else about the Coincidence Project?
So, yes, I'd like to suggest that, as I have, that if you're interested in what we've been talking about today, which some of you are, is you come to the Coincidence Cafe and show up a few times, and sometimes people who show up can volunteer to co-lead coincidence cafes. So that some ideas that you have about coincidences, you can then share with the group, and that becomes a trigger for this breakout groups where people talk about coincidences in small groups with each other, 2 or 3, maybe 4 people, and then they come back to the big group and report sometimes, then go back to a smaller group. So there's a lot of interest in you, and I hope you continue that interest. Chris, what are you going to say?
Well, it says 10 o'clock. It doesn't say what time zone that is.
Where are you?
Coincidence Cafe.
We're in Central.
Well, it's 10 a.m. your time.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, it's Zoom, and Zoom gears it for where you are. It's 11 a.m. Eastern time. So Zoom is very clever that way. So that's it's 10 a.m. your time, and in California it's a little early. It's 8 a.m. for some people. But that's
and you're also, are you still doing research in the with your
are you sure you want me to answer that with a minute left? I will answer it very briefly. I've had this idea of using artificial intelligence